The barn door had been chained from the outside. Samuel Price noticed it before he noticed anything else. Not rusted shut. Chained. There was a difference. He had bought this ranch 2 hours earlier, $1 at a county auction. Nobody else had bid. He pulled the chain loose, pushed the door open. In the far corner, barely visible in the thin light coming through the boards, something moved. A woman. Alive. Barely. Samuel Price had bought a ranch for $1. He had not expected to find a person inside it. What she told him in the next hour would explain why nobody else had bid, and why the man who had owned this land before him was nowhere to be found. This channel tells the stories that the frontier tried to bury. Subscribe now. You need to hear what was in that barn. West Texas, 1879. Land was cheap because land was hard. Every acre that looked like opportunity had already revealed itself as something more complicated to the three men who'd tried it before you. County auctions happened when land went unclaimed, when owners died without heirs, when debts outran the value of everything attached to them, when men disappeared and left their property to whatever the county decided to do with it. Samuel Price had come to Texas 3 months earlier from Georgia, not running from anything in particular, running toward the particular kind of quiet that only existed in places where nobody knew your name yet. He'd read the auction notice in a 2-page newspaper that served 4 counties. 1 parcel, 240 acres. Starting bid, $1. The notice said the previous owner's whereabouts were unknown. It said the property had been sitting vacant for 8 months. It did not say why. Samuel had $43 to his name. He could afford the dollar. He could afford to wait to find out why nobody else wanted 240 acres in a county where land was scarce. What he couldn't afford was not knowing. The auction was held on a Thursday morning outside the county sheriff's office. 7 men attended, 6 of them to watch. Samuel was the only one who bid. When the auctioneer said $1 and looked at the small crowd, the silence that answered him was the specific silence of men who knew something he didn't. The gavel came down in 30 seconds. Samuel Price owned 240 acres of West Texas. He tried to talk to the men who had watched. 2 of them walked away before he finished his sentence. One said he had somewhere to be. One man stayed. Older, hat pulled low, the kind of face that had learned to say less rather than more. "You know why it went for $1? The man said. "No," Samuel said. "That's why I bought it." The old man looked around. Then he said 2 sentences. "The man who owned that land before you was named Colton Webb. Nobody's seen him in 8 months. Ask the sheriff about it when you're ready to know." Then he walked away. Samuel stood on the street with his deed and his dollar's worth of questions. He rode out to the property that afternoon. 2 hours west of town. The kind of ride that showed you exactly what you'd bought. Flat land on all sides. No neighbor within 10 miles. The specific isolation of a place that had chosen to keep its secrets by being too far from anyone who might ask questions. The ranch appeared on the horizon the way abandoned things appear. Smaller than you expected. More deteriorated than the deed suggested. But standing. The house needed work. The fence line was down in 3 places. The well had a cover over it that someone had put there deliberately. And the barn had a chain on it. He looked at the chain for a long time before he touched it. It was not the chain of a man securing livestock. The chain went through the door handles from the outside. The padlock was not old. 8 months, maybe. Consistent with when the previous owner had disappeared. He could go to the house first. He could ride back to town and ask the sheriff those questions the old man had mentioned. He opened the barn. The smell hit him before his eyes adjusted. Hay. Confinement. The specific staleness of a space that hadn't breathed properly in months. He stood in the doorway and let his eyes adjust. The figure in the corner was so still that he thought, for 1 second, that it was a bundle of old clothes. Then it moved. He walked toward it slowly. "Hello," he said. She lifted her head, eyes squinting against light she hadn't seen properly in a long time. She tried to speak. What came out was barely a sound. Samuel went to his horse, came back with his canteen. He held it to her lips, the way a man does when he doesn't know how bad the damage is and doesn't want to make it worse. She drank slowly. When she had enough, she looked at him. Her eyes were dark and exhausted, but they were focused. Whatever had been done to her had not taken the most important thing. Samuel sat down on the barn floor beside her. He waited. She had been there for a long time. He could see that. What he couldn't see yet was why. Her name was Clara Sutton. She gave it the way people give their name when they've stopped being sure it still belongs to them. She had been there for 7 months, not continuously in the barn. In the beginning, she had been in the house. She told it slowly, not from weakness, from the particular care of someone who has rehearsed a story 1,000 times in the dark and knows exactly which parts matter. She had come to this ranch as Colton Webb's wife, married in the spring of 1878. Not a love match, a practical arrangement between her father and a man who owned land and needed someone to keep a house. In the beginning, Colton Webb was exactly what he'd appeared to be, a hard man in a hard place, almost making the land produce what it could. Then he found something. She stopped, looked at Samuel directly. "Under the south pasture," she said. "He found something under the south pasture." Samuel waited. "He didn't tell me what it was at first. He just started acting different, riding out at night. Men coming to the property I didn't know. Then one morning he told me I needed to stay in the barn. He said it was temporary. That was 7 months ago," she said. "What happened to him?" Samuel asked. Clara looked at the barn door, at the chain that had come off it, at the outside world visible through the opening. "I don't know exactly," she said, "but the men stopped coming 2 months after he put me in here. And I never heard his voice again." Samuel got Clara into the house. It was in poor condition, but it had a roof and walls, and that was more than the barn. He made a fire, heated water, found provisions in his saddlebag that were basic but sufficient. With food and warmth, something in her face changed. Not dramatically, just the specific return of a person to themselves after they've been held somewhere too long. "The south pasture," Samuel said. "What did he find?" She studied him. He understood the study. A man she had known for 3 hours had just opened a chain she had spent 7 months behind. Trust was reasonable but not automatic. He waited. "Water," she said finally. "An underground spring. Consistent. Deep. The kind that doesn't dry up in summer." In West Texas in 1879, underground water was not just valuable. It was the difference between land that could sustain cattle through a dry year and land that couldn't. It was the difference between a ranch worth $10 and a ranch worth 10,000. "How many people knew about it?" Samuel asked. "Colton told 3 men," she said. "Men he thought he could trust to help him develop it quietly. He was wrong about all 3. Samuel understood now why the ranch had gone for $1, not because it was worthless, because the people who knew what it was worth had decided that a county auction with a public record was the cleanest way to acquire it from a distance. "The men who came," Samuel said. "Do you know their names?" She knew one of them. His name was Garrett Hale. He ran the largest cattle operation in the county. He was also the man who had filed the debt paperwork that triggered the county auction. He expected to buy it himself, Samuel said. Not a question. He was the only one who knew what was under the south pasture, she said. Or he thought he was. When someone else bid, it would have surprised him. Samuel thought about that. He had bid $1 in a room of 7 men, 6 of whom had not bid, and at least one of whom had a very specific reason for wanting this land and had expected to get it without competition. The sun was getting low. "Can you ride?" he asked Clara. "Yes," she said. "We're going to town tonight," Samuel said. "Not tomorrow. Tonight." She stood, steadier than he expected. 7 months had taken a lot from her. They had not taken everything. They rode out as the last light left the sky. Samuel kept his eyes on the darkness behind them. The ranch disappeared behind them in the dark. What was under the south pasture stayed where it was. It would still be there in the morning. They rode without speaking for a long time. Clara because she was conserving what strength she had. Samuel because he was thinking. He had bought a ranch for $1. He had found a woman locked inside it. He now knew why the previous owner had disappeared. And he knew the name of the man responsible. What he didn't know yet was what to do with all of it. They reached town at 10 o'clock. The sheriff's office had a lamp burning. Samuel pushed the door open. Sheriff Tom Aldridge looked up from his desk with the expression of a man who had learned that nothing good came through his door after 9 at night. When he saw Clara, his expression changed completely. He stood up fast. "Mrs. Webb," he said, "we thought you were—" He stopped. He looked at Samuel, then back at Clara. "Where have you been?" he said. "In the barn," Clara said. The sheriff was quiet for a moment. Samuel put his deed on the desk. "I bought the Webb property today," he said. "I found her when I opened the barn." The sheriff looked at the papers, looked at Clara, looked at Samuel. He sat back down slowly, the weight of several things landing on him at once. "She told me about the spring," Samuel said. "And she told me about Garrett Hale." Something moved across the sheriff's face, not surprise, the specific expression of a man who has been waiting for a name to surface and is not entirely relieved that it finally has. "Is that true, Mrs. Webb?" he said. "Garrett Hale?" "I heard his voice," she said. "The night Colton didn't come back." The sheriff stood up, put on his hat. He looked at his deputy across the room. "Ride out to the Hale property," he said. "Tell him I need to see him in the morning. Tell him it's about the Webb land auction." The deputy left. The sheriff looked at Samuel and Clara. "This is going to be complicated," he said. "Most things worth doing are," Samuel said.
What followed was not simple. Nothing involving Garrett Hale was simple. He was the largest employer in the county. He had money for lawyers. He had relationships with men who made decisions. 3 days after the sheriff's visit, a man came to Samuel's ranch. Not Hale himself. A man who worked for Hale, with an envelope and a polite voice, and an offer that was considerably more than $1. Samuel looked at the envelope, thought about it. He thought about a barn with a chain on it, about what 7 months in that barn had taken from Clara Sutton, about a man named Colton Webb who had made the mistake of trusting the wrong people and had paid for it in a way nobody had found yet. He declined. The messenger left with the envelope still sealed. The pressure increased after that. 2 of Samuel's cattle were found dead near the south pasture. His fence line was cut in 4 places in one night. He repaired the fences. He replaced the cattle with money he didn't really have. He wrote letters, one to a land attorney in Austin, one to a newspaper in San Antonio, one to the Texas Rangers Post in the next county. Clara rode out from town one afternoon. She had been staying at the doctor's wife's house while she recovered. She looked better than she had in the barn, which was not a high bar, but better. "You don't have to stay," she said. "You could sell. Take whatever he's offering and go." Samuel thought about that seriously. He had $42 left. He had a ranch that someone wanted badly enough to cut his fences. He had been in Texas for 3 months. Nobody here knew his name 3 months ago. "I didn't come to Texas to go back," he said. Clara looked at him. "Then I'm staying too," she said. Samuel looked at her. She looked at him. "I know this land," she said. "I know where the spring is. I know the property lines. I know what Colton built and what still needs building." "You're going to need someone who knows." Samuel nodded. Not the nod of a man falling in love. The nod of a man who recognizes that the situation in front of him is larger than one person and has just been offered a second. The attorney from Austin arrived 6 weeks after Samuel's letters. His name was not important. What was important was what he carried. Records of the debt paperwork that had triggered the auction. Records that showed the debt had been manufactured. Filed by a man with connections to Garrett Hale's operation. The sheriff read them carefully. When he finished, he set them down. "This is enough," he said. Garrett Hale was not arrested in a dramatic scene. He was summoned to the county seat. He arrived with 2 lawyers. He left with considerably less certainty than he'd had when he walked in. The legal process took 4 months. At the end of it, 2 men who had worked for Hale were charged with what had happened to Colton Webb. Hale himself faced charges related to the fraudulent debt filing. Colton Webb was found 3 miles from the property. He had been dead since shortly after Clara had been locked in the barn. He had not disappeared. He had been made to disappear. Clara received the news with the expression of someone who had already arrived at the truth months ago in the dark of a barn. She wept once, briefly. Then she went back to work. 6 months after Samuel Price had paid $1 for 240 acres, the ranch looked like what it was, a working property, with a spring under the south pasture that never ran dry. Samuel and Clara had made a practical arrangement, not so different in the end from the one that had originally brought her to this land, except this one was between 2 people who had chosen each other with their eyes open. The barn door stood open. The chain was gone. Samuel had thrown it in the dry creek bed on his second morning on the property. He had not missed it.
$1 is worth exactly what the person spending it is willing to do with it. Samuel Price spent $1 and found 240 acres, an underground spring, and a woman who knew where everything was. He also found a chain on a barn door, and everything that chain meant. The chain is the part of this story people always ask about. How did he know to open it? Why didn't he just leave it? It wasn't his problem yet. He'd only owned the land for 2 hours. The honest answer is that he didn't know what was behind that door. He opened it because it was chained from the outside. And a barn chained from the outside is a barn someone didn't want opened. And a man who has spent good money on 240 acres has a reasonable interest in knowing what's on them. That's the practical answer. But there is another answer, the kind that takes longer to find. Some things are locked away not because they have no value, but because the person who locked them away wanted to be the only one who knew their value. A spring underground, a woman in a barn. Both of them worth considerably more than the person who locked them away wanted anyone to discover. Samuel Price opened that door because he had just paid for everything behind it. What he found was worth more than he paid. That's the story Texas always told about itself, that the land gives back more than it takes, if you're willing to open the doors that someone else chained shut, and deal with what's inside. Every day on this channel, another story from the frontier where what you found depended on what you were willing to look for. This story is a work of fiction, inspired by the spirit of the Texas frontier. If it stayed with you, subscribe. Tell us in the comments. Would you have opened that barn door? The next story is already on your screen.